actually down here is working better than it did.
Yeah, I noticed. The picture is very clear.
Which is funny because I thought that the internet that I was connecting to upstairs was coming from upstairs, but it seems as though it's coming from further down here. Okay, good. Well, that's good. Okay, now we can minimize that. Go back here. Zoom, share our screen. And here we are. Okay. Does everyone see the screen well? Yes?
Uh-huh. Now
Yeah.
I do.
Wonderful. Okay. Where were we holding? No, not there yet. Okay. It's obvious that women have to have mezuzahs on their house, and it's obvious that women have to pray grace after meals after they eat. Okay. Rav Ada bar Ahava said that women are obligated to recite Kiddush. We all familiar with what Kiddush is?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Sorry?
Sure.
Good.
Why?
So, by the way, does anyone know why we say Kiddush?
To give thanks for wine.
To give thanks for wine. So the reason why we say Kiddush is because we're supposed to sanctify the Shabbos day when it comes in and when it leaves. So when Shabbos comes in, we say Kiddush, and then we do that again on Shabbos day. And then when Shabbos is leaving, we do Havdalah to take leave of the Shabbos. Okay, so Rav Ada bar Ahava said that women are obligated to say Kiddush by Torah law, as opposed to many of the other mitzvahs which a woman is obligated in by rabbinic law. So over here saying by Torah law, a woman is obligated to say Kiddush. Can anybody tell me, this is going to rack your brains and your memories, what's the difference practically, besides for whether she has to do it or not, but is there any interesting takeaway whether a woman is obligated or not obligated in a certain mitzvah as it pertains to others? Is a woman allowed to make Kiddush for her husband and her family?
Yes.
So it depends. If she's obligated by Torah law, and the husband is obligated by Torah law, in that case, yes, she can exempt him from his obligation. But if she is only obligated by rabbinic law, and he is obligated by Torah law, then she would not be able to fulfill his obligation for him, to exempt him from his obligation. Okay, so Rav Ada bar Ahava said women are obligated to recite sanctification of the Shabbos day, Kiddush, by Torah law. The Gemara asks why Kiddush is a time-bound positive mitzvah, and women are exempt from all time-bound get up and do mitzvahs. So how could it be that a woman by Torah law would be obligated in Kiddush if it's a time-bound positive mitzvah? Positive meaning that you have to get up and do it. So Abaye says indeed, women are obligated to recite Kiddush by rabbinic law, not by Torah law. So what Rav Ada bar Ahava meant was not by Torah law, but by rabbinic law. Rava refuted that. Rava and Abaye were two close friends who lived together, and they always fought. They always, I shouldn't say fought, they argued about everything. So Rava responded to him. Rava said to Abaye, there are two refutations to your explanation. First, Rav Ada bar Ahava said that women are obligated to recite Kiddush by Torah law. So he said Torah law. How are you coming along now and saying, oh, he meant rabbinic law? He said Torah law. And furthermore, the very explanation is difficult to understand. If the sages do indeed institute ordinances in these circumstances, let us obligate the women to fulfill all time-bound positive mitzvahs by rabbinic law, even though they are exempt by Torah law. In other words, number one, Rav Ada bar Abba said that the women have to say Kiddush by Torah law. So why are you saying that it's only by rabbinic law? Number two is if the sages said that the women have to say Kiddush, then why didn't they enact that decree for all positive get up and do time-bound mitzvahs? That women should also have to put on tefillin and hear the shofar and shake lulav and esrog and all the other things that are time-bound positive mitzvahs. Why are women exempt? If the sages said that they have to say Kiddush, the sages should have said they have to do everything. Rather, Ravina said that this has a unique explanation. In the Ten Commandments, in the book of Exodus, the verse says, remember the Shabbat and sanctify it. While in the book of Deuteronomy, it says, observe Shabbos and sanctify it. Anybody can tell me what's the difference between remembering Shabbos and observing Shabbos?
Well, one is an actual action, the observing, whereas remember is more just not acting but thinking.
Okay.
Except that it says remember and sanctify it.
Oh, you're right.
That's a good point too. So there's an interesting thing, which is that observe is not the literal translation. The literal translation here is guard. So we're remembering Shabbos and we're guarding Shabbos. What's the difference between remembering and guarding? Well, remembering to sanctify it and guarding its sanctification. So there are two different sets of mitzvahs when it comes to Shabbos. There are the things that we get up and do. For example, we say Kiddush, we go to shul, all the other things that we do on Shabbos. And then there are the things that we have to guard ourselves from doing on Shabbos, like using electricity, driving, and the other mitzvahs of Shabbos. All the 39 categories of work. So when it says Zocher es Yom HaShabbos, remember the Shabbos day to sanctify it, that's talking about all the things that we have to get up and do. And when it says guard the Shabbos to sanctify it, is refraining from all the things that we're not supposed to do on Shabbos. From these two variants, we can deduce that anyone included in the obligation to observe Shabbos by avoiding its desecration, is also included in the mitzvah to remember Shabbos by reciting the Kiddush. Because the Ten Commandments are written differently. It's the same word, but it's written differently in Exodus and differently in Deuteronomy. The tradition is that when God spoke, the Jewish people heard those two words at the same time. And that's why we say, L'chadodi shamor v'zachor v'dibur echad. Remember and guard in one word. That God said one word, and we heard both, Zachar and Shamar, observe and remember. And that's why it's written one way in the book of Exodus and differently in the book of Deuteronomy. So from these two variants, we can deduce that anybody who has to remember Shabbos has to observe Shabbos, has to guard Shabbos, and anyone who has to guard Shabbos has to remember the Shabbos as well. So since the women are included in the mitzvah to guard the Shabbos, because there's no distinction between men and women in the obligation to observe prohibitions in general, and to refrain from the desecration of Shabbos in particular. So too, they are included in the mitzvah of remembering Shabbos. And that will be the same with Kiddush, and similar with lighting Shabbos candles as well. That because a woman cannot desecrate the Shabbos, it's not a time-bound positive mitzvah, it's a negative commandment, meaning a stop yourself from doing commandment. Therefore, they're included also in the remembrance, which is the Kiddush. Is that a satisfactory explanation for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Okay. Ravina said to Rava, we learned in the Mishnah, that women are obligated in the mitzvah of grace after meals. However, the question that he's asking is, what is the category of their mitzvah? Are they obligated by Torah law or merely by rabbinic law? The reason to say that they're only obligated by rabbinic law is because as part of the grace after meals, we thank God for the land that he gave to us. And when the land was distributed, it was distributed based on the males in the household, the heads of the household, and wasn't distributed based on the females in the household. Therefore, the question is, can a woman say, the land that you gave me, it was given to my father or my brother, but not necessarily to me, and the women joined along in their husband's possessions? So what's the difference? The difference is going to be, as we said before, the same difference by Kiddush. What difference does it make, whether it's Torah law or rabbinic law? The difference is regarding her ability to fulfill the obligation of others and reciting a blessing on their behalf. Granted, if you say that their obligation is by Torah law, one whose obligation is by Torah law can come and fulfill the obligation of others who are obligated by Torah law. However, if you say that the woman's obligation is by rabbinic law, then from the perspective of Torah law, women are considered to be one who is not obligated. And the general principle is that one who is not obligated to fulfill any particular mitzvah cannot fulfill the obligations of the many, meaning of other people, in that mitzvah. So it is important to know what the resolution is of this dilemma. In other words, a person might have come along and said, what's the difference? So they have to pray grace after meals. Who cares whether it's from the Torah law or from the rabbinic law? The answer is, it makes a big difference. Say the man can't read, the husband can't read, or the son can't read. Can the wife say the blessings and he answer Amen, and then he has fulfilled his obligation? Or does it not work? So if she is obligated by Torah law, then he can exempt him from his obligation by him listening and saying Amen. But if she is obligated by rabbinic law, she cannot exempt him by his mitzvah of Torah law to say the benching, the grace after meal. Is that straightforward or is that a little confusing?
What it says is straightforward. Why it says it, I don't see the reason why.
Okay, so tell me more about what the question is.
Okay, if the mitzvah is obligatory, let me see if I got this right. If the mitzvah is obligatory, then the woman can fulfill it, the mitzvah for her husband or son or whoever, right?
Yeah.
But if the mitzvah is not obligatory, then she cannot fulfill it for her husband, so on. Correct?
I would add just a few words to that, which is by Torah law or by rabbinic law.
So if it's obligatory by Torah law, then she can fulfill it, the obligation for others. But if it's obligatory by rabbinic law, then she cannot.
Right.
And if it's not obligatory by Torah law, well, if it's not obligatory by either one, then she cannot.
Right.
Okay. But why does it matter whether it's obligatory or not?
It's a good question. Let me see if I can come up with a good example. It's not a good example, but it might bring out the point. If you have a truck, a CDL, right, a truck driver license, you can drive a car. But if you have a car license, you can't drive a truck.
Right.
But what do you mean? I have a license. Well, it depends. Is your license rated for that vehicle's gross weight limit or not? So they're both licenses. The question is, which trucks are you allowed to drive?
Okay, I see what you're getting at.
But let's see if I can come up with something better. Let's say in terms of is a person allowed to make a proxy to vote for them?
Well, I mean, not in terms of public elections, but in stockholders' meetings, yeah, you can appoint a proxy. If you're a stockholder, you can appoint a proxy to vote.
Okay, so let's say you live in an HOA, right?
Okay.
Let's say you live in an HOA. Then first of all, my condolences. It's a true story. 2 years ago, I built my sukkah and I got a letter in the mail that I have 30 days to take it down. I said, perfect, it'll be gone in 8.
Okay.
So if, let's say they're voting on something for a new president of the HOA. So you can ask your neighbor to be your proxy, but can you ask someone who lives in a different neighborhood, who's not part of your HOA, to be your proxy?
No.
Probably not. I don't know, but probably not.
Right, so it makes sense to us. I don't know whether you can or whether you can't, but it makes sense to us that, what do you mean? What are you showing up at the board meeting? You're not invited here, right? You have no place here. So this person who lives in his own house can make a proxy, but he can only choose a proxy from someone who is voting. Someone who's not included in the vote, someone who doesn't have to vote, or someone who's voting in a different HOA won't be able to be my proxy over here to fulfill my obligation and my duties of voting. So if the person that I'm choosing as a proxy is obligated in the vote, then they can be my proxy. But if the person that I'm choosing as my proxy is not obligated in the vote, then they can't be a good proxy for me. So back to here. If the woman is obligated by Torah law, then she can exempt my Torah law vote of grace after meal. But if she's only obligated by rabbinic law, then she can't fulfill my Torah obligation. Does that help?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So obligated, if she's obligated by rabbinic law, she cannot perform for the others. So the only way she can perform for the others is if it's obligatory by Torah law. If she's
obligated by Torah law. Now,
is the only condition.
She could exempt other women because the other women are only obligated by rabbinic law. So she could exempt other women because they have the same level of obligation as she does. But she can't exempt men because they have a stronger level of obligation, and therefore because she's not obligated in it, so she can't exempt them from their obligation.
So the only way that a wife can exempt her husband is if the husband is obligated by Torah law.
is if the wife is obligated by Torah law.
If the wife is obligated by Torah law. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Meaning, so long as they have the same level of obligation, then they can exempt each other. Or the person who has a stronger level, a higher level of obligation, can exempt the one with a lesser level of obligation.
Wait a minute, you just said that if they have the same level of obligation, they can. So if they're both not obligated for a particular mitzvah, then the wife can perform it for the husband.
Yes, for example, if her husband is a deaf mute, then they would have the same level of obligation.
Okay.
Someone who is deaf mute is exempt from all the mitzvahs by Torah law. So she would be able to exempt him of his obligation. Yeah. So it's very important to know what is the resolution of this dilemma. Okay, come and hear a proof from what we learned in a brisa. The MS Amru, they actually said that a son may recite a blessing on behalf of his father, and a slave may recite a blessing on behalf of his master, and a woman may recite a blessing on behalf of her husband. But the sages said, may a curse come to a man who, due to his ignorance, requires that his wife and children should recite a blessing on his behalf.
Amen.
So from here we seem to say that a woman is able to recite a blessing on behalf of her husband. It's a bad sign if he is ignorant and his wife is the learned one in the house. It's not a good sign. The husband should be learned. So we have to infer from here. Granted, if you say that their obligation is by Torah law, then one whose obligation is by Torah law can come and fulfill the obligations of others who are obligated by Torah law. And therefore, the brisa makes sense. However, if you say that their obligation is by rabbinic law, if the women are only obligated by rabbinic law, can one who is obligated by rabbinic law come and fulfill the obligation of one whose obligation is by Torah law? So how could a woman, the only way that we can explain this brisa that we learned before, that a woman can bless on behalf of her husband, must mean that a woman is obligated by Torah law. Because if she was only obligated by rabbinic law, she would not be able to fulfill her husband's obligation. The Gemara is going to challenge this proof though, because according to your reasoning, let's look at the way this goes. We said that a son can bless on behalf of his father, but we know that a minor under bar mitzvah is exempt by Torah law. Everyone agrees that a minor is exempt by Torah law. Yet here the brisa says that he may recite a blessing on behalf of his father. So there must be another way to explain the brisa. So then we might have to give a little bit of a background over here. We might have to give a little bit of background over here. The Torah says, "Ve'achalta ve'savata uve'rachta." You will eat, and you will be satiated, and you should bless. So when do you have to make grace after meals? How much do you have to eat in order to say the grace after meals?
If you eat a little, then you still have to say the grace.
Zalman, do you agree?
Well, if you say you eat and will be satiated, then you have to just eat enough to be satiated, satisfied.
Yeah. And how much is that?
So you don't want to eat anymore, so you're full.
Okay, good. So should we spend a few minutes on a little rant?
A little what?
A little rant.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay, beautiful. This is one of my favorite ones. And it's even better because it doesn't even, you'll see. It's a good one. So let's stop the share for a minute so that we can, I can see I have a big screen over here. I can see everyone anyway. Okay. This is what I like to call recipe book Judaism. What's recipe book Judaism? Anyone here good at cooking in the kitchen?
I am.
I want boiled water without burning it.
Oh, very good. I know a guy. He said that he used to say that whatever he touched, like it wouldn't work out well. No matter what it was, no matter what he was doing, whatever he was doing, it didn't work out well. He says one time his wife told him, okay, I put the chicken in the oven for you and it's ready to go. The only thing you need to do is take it out and put it in the oven. And he preheated the oven. He remembered to preheat it and he put it in. And when he took out the chicken, it was glazed and it looked so good. When his wife came home, she said, what's that smell? He says, I don't know, but the chicken looks so good and it has this beautiful glaze on it. She said, you chacham, shlamiyah. You forgot to take up the saran wrap before you put it in the oven. That's where the beautiful glaze was coming from. Yeah, so cooking, I'm pretty good at. Baking, I don't have the slightest clue. So when I cook in the kitchen, if I'm making supper, I don't measure out the ounces and the spices and everything. I feel by intuition, the chef's intuition, and you put it in and it makes an. I have sisters-in-law that can bake a challah like that. They can put in flour, water, or whatever spice. They can bake cookies, cakes, whatever you want. They just put it together and it comes out tasting great. If I don't follow the recipe, it comes out horrible. And I'm looking and double checking each thing, each measurement before I do it. So Judaism used to be intuitive. When do you wake up in the morning and say Shema? Well, they woke up in the morning at the right time and they said Shema. How did they know when Shabbos was coming? They looked up in the sky. They saw when the sun was going down and they knew when Shabbos was coming. How did they know when was midday? They knew. They looked up at the sky. They were able to tell this is the sky and this is the sun is in the middle of the sky, and they were able to tell. It was all intuitive and they were very connected. How much wine do you have to drink by Kiddush? How much wine do you have to drink by Kiddush? So they knew how much it was. It was a mouthful. How big is a mouthful, right? When you're talking about measuring in inches and ounces and all these things. So let's talk about a handbreadth. How big is a handbreadth?
It varies from person to person.
Right? So it varies from person to person, but everybody understood. They knew, my hand is a little bit shorter than average. My hand is a little bit longer than average. And they were able to figure it out. Then came a time where it wasn't working anymore. And so the sages realized that we're going to have to put together a recipe book for Judaism. And that's where we have that the size of an olive. How big is the size of an olive? Right? They took an olive off the tree and they knew, is this a small olive or a big olive, or this is the average olive that we're talking about. How big is an egg? A chicken's egg. Well, some are small and some are big, but they knew which ones we're talking about. So today we have ounces and measurements in inches and millimeters, and we see everything. We know exactly what's going on. So that's why we have the times to the milliseconds. We have the times. We discussed this, I think, a while ago. We know when exactly everything is happening. They didn't need that in the olden days. They knew. But today we need recipe book Judaism. And we need it. Otherwise, things won't happen the right way. It won't turn out the right way. So it used to be, so from Torah law, a person eats and is satiated. And then when they're full, then they make grace after meals. And if they're not full, they don't make grace after meals. However, the sages made an institution. They instituted that if a person eats the size of an olive, which is half the size of an egg. You ever saw an olive that was half the size of an egg?
The big olive.
But yeah, it's a pretty big olive.
Mm.
So if you ate the amount of an olive's worth of food, then already you have to make grace after meals. And we're going to learn later that God was very happy with this.
What if somebody is too poor to have enough to satiate him?
That's a good question. Do they have to make grace after meals? So we're going to see that here. So what was the Brisa talking about? The Brisa must have been talking about a different case because it said that a child is able to exempt his father. So there must be another way to explain the Brisa. With what are we dealing here? With a case where the father ate a quantity of food that did not satisfy his hunger. A measure for which one is only obligated by rabbinic law to recite grace after meals. And because of that, one whose obligation is by rabbinic law can come and fulfill the obligation of another whose obligation is by rabbinic law. So therefore, because the father only ate less than the amount that would make him satiated, so the mother and the child and the father all have the same level of obligation. They're all only obligated by rabbinic law. Therefore, the wife and the son could exempt the father from his obligation by him listening to them and responding amen. So where did we go here? We said, wait, it says in the Brisa that a woman can exempt her husband. So seemingly a woman would be obligated by Torah law. That's a good proof that women are obligated by Torah law. Then we responded, no, it can't be because everybody knows that children are not obligated by Torah law. And in our Brisa it says that a child is able to bless on behalf of his father. Therefore, what we are talking about must be a case where the father is also obligated by rabbinic law, and the mother and the son and the father all have, the same level of obligation. Therefore, the wife and the son can exempt the husband, the father. So it seems from here, where we're leaving off, that a woman is only obligated in grace after meals from rabbinic decree, from rabbinic law. So, after citing the halacha that one who eats a quantity of food that does not satisfy his hunger is obligated by rabbinic law to recite the grace after meals, the Gemara recites a homiletic interpretation. Rav Avira taught, and sometimes he said it in the name of Rabbi Ami, and sometimes he said it in the name of Rabbi Asi. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi were two great teachers who lived together at the same time, and if I'm not mistaken, there are many quotes that Rav Avira used to say, and sometimes he would quote them from Rabbi Ami, sometimes he would quote them from Rabbi Asi, which seems to imply that Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi kind of bounced ideas off each other, and they had a conversational kind of teaching, and the students were able to, therefore, everything that their students learned came from a compilation of the both of them. So sometimes he would say the following discourse in the name of Rabbi Ami, and sometimes he would say it in the name of Rabbi Asi. The ministering angel said before the Holy One, blessed is He, Master of the universe. In your Torah it is written, the great, mighty, and awesome God, who favors no one and takes no bribe. Yet you nevertheless show favor to Israel, as it is written, the Lord shall show favor to you and give you peace. So how is that fair? It says that God doesn't have any favorites, and God doesn't take bribes, and He doesn't favor anyone. But it says that God favors the Jews. So God responded to them, how can I not show favor to Israel? So I wrote for them in the Torah, you shall eat and be satisfied, and then you should bless the Lord your God. Meaning that there is no obligation to bless the Lord until one is satiated. Yet they are exacting with themselves, and they recite the grace after meals, even if they have eaten as much as the size of an olive or the size of an egg. Since they go beyond the requirements of the law, they are worthy of favor. So it seems God does take bribes. Different kind of bribes. Yeah. So because the Jewish people, so this is where we were going for before, what we were mentioning before, that as soon as we eat enough as the size of an olive or the size of an egg, already we're making the grace after meals, God appreciates and approves of that. And we have finished the conversation on the previous mitzvah, of the previous Mishnah, sorry. Continuing with the next Mishnah, where I think we're still on 28, correct? I believe so. Yeah, 20b, sorry. Says the Mishnah, very interesting law, which is going to lead us into some very interesting conversation. A background, I think we may have given this background before, that purity and impurity. What is the general rule regarding purity and impurity? Let me ask you this. Why is a woman who is menstruating considered impure?
Because no man can have any relationship to a woman who has blood.
Okay, because a man is forbidden from having intimacy to a woman while she's on her period, correct?
Uh-huh.
But why? Meaning that's the impure, that's the problem, that a lot of people associate the impurity together with the abstination from intimacy. And say, oh, a woman is therefore disgusted and pushed away. God forbid. God forbid. The two are related but not so connected, or connected but not so related. The general rule is that impurity comes whenever there is a loss of life or a loss of potential life. The greatest example for this is death. When a human corpse is considered the godfather of impurity, right? The grandfather of impurity. A human corpse is the most impure thing that could exist. Why is a human corpse impure? Because where there was life and holiness, and that holiness has departed, the impure forces try to take hold. So when we wake up in the morning, right, when we're sleeping, our soul, anybody knows about the ritual of washing our hands every morning? Familiar with that? Maybe what's called Negelwasser, washing our hands in the morning. Why do we wash our hands in the morning? One of the reasons is because while we're sleeping, our soul is dormant to a certain degree. Our energies lay dormant, and therefore the forces of impurity try to take hold of us and try to gain from our energy. So when we wake up in the morning and our soul comes back in, the impure energies leave from us, but there's still some left in our nails, our fingernails, and that's why we wash our hands the way we wash our hands in the morning. It's a Kabbalistic thing, spiritual thing, not because of physical dirt or anything like that. So when it comes to what is a period? What is menstruation? Is the shedding of the lining that was getting ready to prepare for the possible implantation of a fetus. In other words, there was potential life here. There was an egg that was getting ready to be fertilized, but it didn't get fertilized. So there was a potential for life which is lost, and that is the cause for the impurity of a woman who is menstruating. The same applies, but to a lesser degree, to a man who has a seminal emission. A man who has a seminal emission, so Ezra the scribe decreed that one who is ritually impure because of a seminal emission may not engage in matters of Torah until he has immersed in a ritual bath and purified himself. So the seminal emission causes a man to become impure to a lesser degree, to a similar degree actually, to a woman who is menstruating. Why? We're going to learn later. But he decided, it's not forbidden to learn Torah while you are impure. A woman is allowed to learn Torah while she's on her period. But Ezra the scribe made a decree. Let's look inside in the Mishnah. Ezra the scribe made a decree that one who is ritually impure because of a seminal emission may not engage in matters of Torah until he has immersed himself in a ritual bath and purified himself. This halacha was accepted over the course of many generations. However, many disputes arose with regard to the Torah matters in which it applies. Is this in regards to getting an aliyah at the Torah, reading from the Torah, thinking about Torah, reciting Shema? So that's what this Mishnah is coming to clarify. Regarding this, the Mishnah says, If the time for the recitation of Shema has arrived and one is impure due to a seminal emission, he's not allowed to speak the words of the Shema. Rather, he may contemplate Shema in his heart, but neither recites the blessings preceding the Shema, nor the blessings that follow it. Over food, which after partaking one is obligated by Torah law to recite a blessing, one recites the blessing afterwards, but does not recite the blessing beforehand, because the blessing recited prior to eating is a requirement by rabbinic law. And in all of these instances, Rabbi Yehuda argues and says, no, he recites a blessing before and after, both the case of Shema and in the case of food. The blessings he can recite, but the Shema he has to think in his heart because he is impure. So we're going to continue this discussion maybe next week. If there is school next week, then we'll continue the discussion next week. If not, we will continue the discussion after the holiday season. Tomorrow we are having class here at the new Chabad House, 3800 Emperor Boulevard, number 109. Looking forward to see everyone who can make it. And wishing you a wonderful day. If I don't see you next until Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur Kol Nidre is going to be here Friday afternoon. What time was it? 6:30? Let's look for him. Friday afternoon, 6:30 begins the Kol Nidre service. We're going to have candle lighting, some snacks before the holiday, before Yom Kippur begins. There's some honey cake, something like that. So come at 6:30. I think it's 6:30. You can come a few minutes early if you'd like. So we'll see you Friday night at 6:30 or tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Okay. 11?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, 11. Right. Yeah, 11.
Okay. Take care, Zagas. Yeah, perfect. 11 still works, yes?
Yes. I just haven't seen your
Perfect.
moment.
No worries. Take care.
Yeah. All right.
All the best.
Have a good day.
Have
Bye.
a good day.
Mm.
Thank you, Rabbi.